you've always said you're in it for the long term. But about 2 million people would like an election much sooner than 5 years away. 2 million people have signed a petition. You've been pushing it along for a while. What does that tell you?
There is a deep sense of dissatisfaction that a government that was elected with only 20% of the adults in the country voting for them, with a massive majority. Well, the fact that a petition is launched on Sunday and gets 2 million or 2.5 million now signatures within 48 hours, I've never seen a petition grow as quickly as this.
Nigel Farage versus Sky News, a battle for the truth or a political meltdown. In this video, we'll take you behind the scenes of the interview that's dividing the nation. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. You'll see the exact moment Farage loses his cool, and the reporter's reaction that sent him over the edge. But who really came out on top? The answer might surprise you. The atmosphere crackled with tension as Nigel Farage squared off against the Sky News reporter. It was clear from the outset that this wouldn't be a friendly chat. The reporter wasted no time, launching into a barrage of questions about Reform UK's vetting processes. Farage, initially composed, found himself on the back foot.
I've never, in the half a century I've looked at politics, I've never seen a Prime Minister lose popularity as quickly as this. And have now done things like attacking the farmers, taking money away from pensioners that they didn't say they would do in the run-up to the campaign in their manifesto. So there's a real breach of trust. It's ironic, they're in real trouble, and yet they've got a huge parliamentary majority. Things can only get worse. I mean, the whole thing's absolutely bonkers, and it needs to be reformed along with much else in our country.
Look, I didn't know any of this when I took back over as leader, Farage defended, his voice tinged with frustration. The reporter pressed harder, bringing up James MC Murdo, a candidate allegedly not vetted by the party. This revelation seemed to catch Farage off guard, his usual confidence wavering for a moment. But the interrogation was far from over. The reporter shifted gears, targeting controversial comments made by Reform UK members. Accusations of racism and extremism within the party hung in the air like a heavy fog. Farage, visibly agitated, dismissed these claims as a tirade of invective abuse. He suggested some incidents were politically motivated setups, his voice rising with each word. The tension reached a boiling point when the reporter refused to let up. Farage's composure began to crack, his answers becoming more defensive and combative. Then, in a sudden pivot that left the reporter momentarily speechless, Farage turned the tables. The mainstream media are always trying to dig for a story that isn't there, he declared, his voice dripping with disdain.
A mile wide, an inch deep, but this is what we've talked about the real change that the UK needs, which is a system that is not the first past the post scenario anymore.
I mean, the whole thing's absolutely bonkers, and it needs to be reformed along with much else in our country. For every single Labour MP, there are 34,000 votes, right? Wow. For every Reform MP, there are 815,000 votes.
Farage's eyes narrowed as he launched into an attack on perceived media bias, years of frustration bubbling to the surface. But Farage wasn't done. In a move that caught everyone off guard, he began boasting about his social media following. "I've got over 1 million followers on TikTok," he proclaimed, a hint of smugness creeping into his tone. He contrasted his online popularity with what he saw as the waning influence of traditional media outlets. As Farage continued his tirade, mentioning Reform UK's 100,000 members, it became clear that this interview had taken an unexpected turn. The public's reaction to this confrontation would be deeply divided. Some would see Farage as a crusader against media bias, while others would question his ability to handle scrutiny. One thing was certain, the aftermath of this explosive exchange would reverberate through British political discourse for days to come. The interview had ended, but the real drama was just beginning. In the hours that followed, social media erupted with conflicting narratives. One user's comment cut through the noise. "Pure hatred on your face when talking to Nigel Farage. I dare you to talk to any Labour MP the same way." way. This sentiment echoed across various platforms, with Farage's supporters rallying behind him. They saw his confrontational stance as a necessary pushback against what they perceived as biased mainstream media. Critics, however, painted a different picture. They argued that Farage's inability to handle tough questions exposed the weaknesses in Reform UK's vetting processes and overall party structure. The incident's coverage varied wildly across media outlets. Some framed Farage as a victim of overly aggressive questioning, while others emphasized the importance of holding political figures accountable. This stark contrast in reporting only served to deepen the divide between Farage's supporters and detractors. Interestingly, the confrontation seemed to have an unexpected impact on Reform UK's public image. Some polls indicated a surge in support for the party, suggesting that Farage's defiant attitude resonated with a segment of the electorate. However, other surveys showed a decline in overall trust in Farage, highlighting the controversial nature of his approach. Political communication experts weighed in on Farage's media strategy. While they acknowledged that his confrontational style effectively energized his base, they warned of potential risks. The approach, they argued, could alienate moderate voters and reinforce negative perceptions among critics. This incident wasn't an isolated event, but rather part of a larger pattern in Farage's interactions with mainstream media. The long-term consequences of this confrontation could be far-reaching. For Farage and Reform UK, it might mean a further solidification of their core support base, but at the cost of broader appeal. Traditional media outlets, on the other hand, face the challenge of maintaining public trust while navigating an increasingly polarized political landscape. As the dust settles, a crucial question emerges. What does this mean for political discourse in the UK? The growing divide between populist figures like Farage and mainstream media outlets reflects a deeper societal split. With trust in traditional journalism eroding and alternative media channels gaining traction, the future of political communication in Britain hangs in the balance. Will this incident be remembered as a turning point or just another chapter in the ongoing saga of British politics? The Farage Sky News confrontation reveals deep fissures in Britain's political landscape. It's not just about one politician's media strategy, but a broader shift in how information is consumed and trust is earned. Farage's pivot to social media influence highlights the declining sway of traditional outlets. This trend raises serious questions about accountability and the future of political discourse. As public trust in mainstream media wanes, we're seeing a fragmentation of information sources. Politicians like Farage can now bypass traditional gatekeepers, speaking directly to their base through platforms like TikTok. But this comes with risks. Without the filter of professional journalism, how can we ensure politicians are held to account? The incident also exposes the growing polarization in British society. Farage's supporters and critics seem to inhabit different realities, each with their own set of facts and interpretations. This divide is widening, fueled by echo chambers on social media and declining faith in shared institutions. Looking ahead, we must grapple with a crucial question. In an era of media distrust and social media dominance, how can we foster a political discourse that's both robust and fair? The answer may shape the future of British democracy.